Welcome to the Core Women Podcast, the place for women entrepreneurs, authors, and self-starters looking to build community and gain valuable insights through expert interviews with women at the top of their game. Join your host, podcaster, producer, expert coach, entrepreneur, and author, Dr. Summer Watson, as she aims to inspire and empower you through these candid conversations. Lean in and embrace the journey. It's time to start the show. Here's your host, Dr. Summer Watson.
Welcome back to the Core Women Podcast, where personal breakthroughs turn into powerful missions. Today's guest is Sheryl Green, a woman who took people-pleasing to Olympic heights until she hit a wall that forced her to reevaluate everything. After a lifetime of saying yes at her own expense, Sheryl discovered that transformative power of boundaries, now known as How to Say No Expert. Sheryl helps individuals and organizations set healthy boundaries to improve communication, relationships, and overall well-being. She's the author of You Had Me at No, How Setting Healthy Boundaries Helps You Banish Burnout, Repair Relationships, and Save Your Sanity. Today, she is here to remind us that saying no isn't selfish, it's essential. Welcome, Sheryl.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have you here. But before we jump into the professional aspects of your life, if you could describe your journey in one word to this point, what would that word be and why?
It's going to be hyphenated, but I'm going with mission driven. It's kind of two words, but whatever. I was doing some journaling a couple of days ago, and I realized that everything I've been through, especially as an adult, I have turned around into a way to support others. So I had a, major divorce and a depression after it, and it led me to speaking, and it led me to really sharing that story and that, I'll say, trauma, but being able to turn it around into a positive thing for others. And everything I've gone through as an adult so far, I've done that. And that made me feel kind of good.
Absolutely. So my next question, and this is a great segue into that question, but describe yourself as a recovering people pleaser. Can you take us back to the moment when you realized something had to change?
Yeah, so the people pleasing, that has been my entire life. And I think a lot of people can probably relate to this. As a child, I was there to make others happy. I was there to care for others. My worth was defined by what I did for other people and what I achieved and things like that. And that messes with your head quite a bit. So I will say the moment, and I liked how you phrased that because that's exactly how I talk about it when I talk about my story. My moment was sitting on the side of the road, hysterical crying. I had just considered driving into oncoming traffic. I had seen headlights, on the opposite side of the road, and I'd thought to myself, I don't see an end in sight. And this seems like the only viable solution. And just to back that up a little bit, we'll Quentin Tarantino this for a moment. I was working full-time at an animal rescue. If you've ever worked in nonprofit, full-time is not 8 hours. It's usually 12
Oh,
plus.
absolutely.
I was running my own content writing, book coaching, and ghostwriting business, and taking care of parents who were older and sick. And I never met a board that I didn't join. So my plate was incredibly full, and I dealt with it for a little while. My parents used to say I ran Mach 5 with my hair on fire. And I did that for a little while. And after about 6 months of just the entire world feeling like it was on my shoulders, I started to cry more than usual. And I cry a lot to begin with, but I started to cry, and I couldn't sleep. And I couldn't get a sentence out without being short and bursting into tears. My responsibilities, everything was kind of falling by the wayside. And I was drinking more than I've ever drank. I'm not a drinker at all. And it was like this downward spiral into, I assumed, depression. What I didn't realize at the time was I was experiencing burnout. That term wasn't quite as popular as it is these days. And it certainly wasn't something we talked about, when I went for my psychology education. So I didn't know what was happening. And it wasn't until that moment, sitting on the side of the road going, I don't want to hurt anybody. I certainly don't want to leave my parents and my dog without anybody to take care of them. Sitting there, that was that moment that I literally said to myself, something has to give.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story and that moment, because those are vulnerable moments where we're really sitting at that edge and we're looking at ourselves going, what has happened? How has my situation kind of decompensated to the point where I feel hopeless? So you had that turning point where you began to say no. It wasn't just a word, but a strategy for survival, growth, and to thrive. Talk more about that.
So it actually took me another 6 months. So I knew in that moment, sitting at the side of the road, that something had to change, but I didn't know what. I ended up taking a month off from the rescue for my own sanity and ended up not going back. But it took another 6 months of me first clearing all the responsibilities, the unnecessary responsibilities off my plate, and then watching them slowly all come back. And it was like they each brought a friend. So,
Oh,
so
okay.
yeah. So I was back almost at my starting point, if not worse. And it was one of those like, what has happened moments. Thankfully, a friend of mine sent me, I think it was an article on boundaries. And I remember looking at it and going, these sound fantastic. I should get some of these. But anybody that's been on this journey, you don't suddenly wake up with like the light bulb going, oh, it's time to set boundaries. And 20 minutes later, you are like queen of boundary setting. It was definitely a journey after that, but I figured I probably wasn't the only one that had that problem. Listeners, you can't see faces right now, but your expression, Summer, is exactly what I get from other people. They're like, yeah, that's a
Yeah.
huge problem with most of the world. So I was like, let me bring other people along on this journey as I go. And I screw up all the time. I'll be the first person to tell you that. And I always write a blog about it. As soon as I screw up and as soon as I realize like what happened and, like I fell off the boundary wagon or I had a relapse or whatever you want to call it, I'll always sit down and write a blog the next day and be like, okay, I figured out what happens and now I'm prepared for it the next time. So this has definitely been a journey. This has definitely been a learning experience and I'm constantly learning. Just a couple of days ago, I had like that next level realization of, okay, well, wait, if I can create generalities over what kind of behaviors I'm not comfortable with from other people, then I'll be able to recognize them faster. So it's constantly evolving, it's constantly turning, but I don't know if I answered your question. I'm sorry, I went off on a tangent.
You did. That is okay. No, no, no. That is absolutely okay. It is your strategy for survival and growth. And I think you mentioned how that has evolved for you. And also when you find yourself falling off that boundaries bandwagons, I think a lot of us have been there. And I loved what you mentioned. It's not something that happens overnight. We've been there and we don't know the steps. We don't know maybe even how to recognize that we're not setting boundaries because we've been people pleasers. We've been helpers. We've been the person that everybody comes to say, hey, can you do this? Can you get this done? Oh, I know you can get it done.
Yes.
From family to work to, so many people in our lives. So absolutely. And when you had mentioned during your story that your parents saying that you were running at Mach 5, like with a fire going, that was me. That
Yeah.
was me at Berkeley. So I was running and people would say, you run like there's a fire under your feet. Well, I was.
Uh-huh. There was a fire. You
There
just couldn't
was a
see it.
fire. I needed to survive and, didn't understand. And we didn't use the word thrive and growth. And it was, you do things to get things done so that you can make it happen, whether or not that's pay your rent, graduating from college, to being that employee that's going to do well at the job. And so you say yes to a lot of different things that may cause your burnout. So in your book, you had me at no. You shared the PEC framework: pause, elevate, communicate. Can you walk us through how this works in real life?
Yes, absolutely. Let's just use an example here. So let's say your friend calls you, they've just gotten a promotion. It's a Tuesday night. They just found out that they've got this promotion. They're super excited. They want to go out and celebrate. Your initial reaction, or if you're a people pleaser, your instantaneous reaction is, yes, let's do it. Let's go. And you just throw caution to the wind. However, there's a couple of problems with that. One, you may be exhausted. Two, you may have other plans. Three, you may have a big meeting or a big presentation the next morning that you have to prepare for, you have to be awake for, and it's preferable that you're not hungover.
Yeah.
So, and you look at that and you've got all of these kind of trickle down issues that can happen if you just go with that initial, yes, sure, let's do it. Absolutely. And, let me buy. Because we always want to go one step further. We always want to be the hero, the martyr, the people pleaser, the woohoo. So you can use that woohoo as a scientific definition now.
Woohoo!
Now we look at it through the PEC framework. What that looks like is your first step is to pause. Okay, because we have a tendency to get stuck in that reptilian lizard brain that's still afraid if we don't make people happy, nobody's going to watch our back and we're going to get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger. So sounds ridiculous. I know, when you're sitting there like, what am I afraid of? Oh, I don't want to be eaten. Sounds absurd, but that's the process that our brain and our body is going through. So first, we got to get out of that brain. So you're going to pause. And whether that looks like taking a deep breath, taking a sip, taking a bite if you're eating something, nodding your head, whatever that looks like, just keep your mouth shut for like a couple of seconds. All right, we're just going to shift out of that lizard brain and into your logical brain. Once we do that, sometimes you're going to know the answer is yes or no right away. And I always joke around, I have friends that do the Spartan, and they're always inviting me. I don't want to get electrocuted. I don't have to think about this very long. Like, this isn't a huge process for me. Like, no. Sometimes it's an obvious yes or an obvious no. And sometimes you actually really have to buy yourself some time and you have to step out of the situation. And that's okay too. We're not talking about life or death stuff here. We're stepping back and we're going, you know what? Let me check my calendar. I'll give you a call right back.
Yeah. But I will say, Sheryl, you had mentioned that we're not talking about life or death, right? And so I work in locked mental health facilities, and people would come in through the back being brought in by law enforcement, the fire department, you name it, and they were at risk of hurting themselves, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe somebody else. And they were brought in, sit in a chair, we'd have to process them through. And part of that process is that pause.
Yeah.
And we always try to have the person in that seat take a pause, because it may have been a life or death situation for them. And that pause was critical. It was critical for the breath, for the clarity, for maybe reflection,
Yes.
or maybe focus. So the pause really is important. And then you take it to evaluate.
Yeah. So evaluate is really running through a set of questions in your head or out loud with somebody if you've got a boundary buddy. But those questions are, do I want to or have to? Do I have the resources to do it? Because everything we do takes resources. And finally, am I willing to give something else up? And if we're looking back at our, going out situation, do I want to or have to? Probably don't have to. Do you want to? Yeah, maybe you do. Do you have the resources? You've got the money. Your evening is free. Yeah, technically you do. But then we move to that last question. What are you willing to give up? Are you willing to give up being awake the next day? Are you willing to give up, getting early and doing your morning routine, whatever that looks like for you? So you have to be able to answer yes to all of those questions. And I think that's what we sometimes forget. Like, I think most of us do run through some version of those questions in our head. However, we don't realize that they all have to be yes. We say, oh, well, we want to. Well, maybe we're ignoring the fact that, we haven't gotten paid yet. And, it's going to cost a ton at the bar. Or I don't know, we have to prepare for something that night. We think, well, I want to or I have to, so it doesn't matter what else is going on.
Yeah.
That leads us to agree to things that we can't actually follow through on. And that's when we really let people down.
Yeah. Or we may even follow through on them and just feel really bad while we're doing it in
Yeah.
relation to, I should be home doing that paper. I should be home prepping for that speech. I might need to be home for A, B, or C, yet here I am. I'm spending money I don't have. I'm here, thinking about all these things that I should be doing. And yet I said yes to this.
And did you ever have that friend out with you that didn't want to be there?
Oh,
How much
yeah.
fun are they?
So, so not so much fun, but we get to that communication part. So talk more about that.
Look, we can set all the boundaries that we want inside of our heads. Until we actually have to share our response with another human being, we haven't actually set a boundary. We've just made a fluffy little wish. So that communication piece is going to be really important. It can make or break our boundary. This will be the hill that I die on. The no is a complete sentence. Every time I hear that, I want to hit my head up against something. Yeah, absolutely. It is grammatically yes, it's a full sentence for sure. But imagine your friends and say, I just got this great promotion. Let's go out and celebrate. And you going, no. Or your boss calling you into their office and saying, hey, I need you to get me this report by the end of the day. And you going, no. It may be the answer. It may be the right answer. It may be a completely acceptable response. But man, it's not enough on its own, folks.
Right. That's
Really
why I'm
not.
laughing. Could you imagine? I mean, I'm getting this visual of sitting in front of a boss going, no.
Oh. Look, this was a low stakes situation. I'll never be back at this restaurant for so many reasons. But, a waitress came over and I was like, hey, I don't eat sausage. Could I just have one extra egg instead? No. Cool. And again, I'm sorry you guys can't see my face. I have a Muppet face. But what do you do with that? So here's where I like to make the distinction. You don't owe people an explanation. You don't. For most people, your boss, you may owe an explanation. But for the people you want to have, strengthen, and continue a relationship with, you owe them context. And even if that context is, I'm so sorry, I can't support you in that way right now. Or I'm so sorry, my schedule is packed. Let's hang out on Saturday. Let's celebrate then. There's one little extra word or one extra little sentence that does not take anything away from you and doesn't make it seem like you're apologizing your way out of your boundary. It's just, I'm sorry, I can't do that. And that is the difference between having the friend Wednesday morning and having a really awkward situation, or having a job the next day, or having a boss who has now fired you for insubordination.
Yeah.
Context, folks, please. Just a little.
Absolutely. And these boundaries aren't just for us, but they're really for the health of our relationships, which is why you also give that context of going beyond the no. And yes, a no is a sentence in its own, but at the same time, even if you omit the sorry part and say, I would love to, however, I have a presentation to prep for tomorrow. Let's catch up. Let's set a date on our calendar. I absolutely want to connect, but let's set that date.
Yes.
Because again, it's for the health of your relationship with the other. I love what you're going through here. So many great tips in regards to setting boundaries and the process of being able to do that. But for someone who hasn't set a boundary, and they pick up your book and they read it, they'll see that you mentioned something about boundary buddy versus boundary busters. Talk about that.
Yeah, so boundary buddies are the people in your life, the friends, the family, the coworkers, the significant others, I like to call them. They're the people in your life that are going to, one, support you no matter what your answer is. They're going to, two, be a sounding board. And three, sometimes they might even be a scapegoat, a willing scapegoat. I got married 2.5 years ago. And before that, there was no checking with someone else before I made a decision. Like, oh, you want me to watch your dog for 3 weeks? Okay. Now it's, oh, I have to check with my husband. And that's the time that gets me out of the I'm going to be eaten stage into the wait a second, we've already got 3 dogs running around here. One more, like, I think we're officially at circus level. So it gives me that time to think. So, and sometimes I go back and be like, oh, you know what? I'm so sorry. My husband's really not comfortable having a dog there that long. And he is like, I'm your scapegoat. Do it. And I do the same for him. I'm like, you don't want to go somewhere? Tell them I don't want you to go, whatever it is. But it's having that person in your life that supports you, which is in direct opposition to the boundary busters. And those boundary busters are the people, and if you think about it right now, probably somebody's going to come to mind. They're the ones that you set a boundary with your, newborn baby giraffe legs. You set a boundary and you're like, no, I can't do that. And you sit back and you like wait for the world to explode. And the person goes, why? You've always done that before. If you really cared about me, you would do that. Anybody, but and they go through this manipulation, guilting, this again spiral of I'm going to get you to change your response. Some people are going to have a negative reaction the first time you set a boundary. They're not used to you saying no. We're creatures of habit and we do not like when things change. But people that care about you and respect you, they're going to be like, yeah, no, I get it. Okay. The people that don't respect you, that's the real key here, to know that you're with a boundary buster and it's actually okay that maybe they don't stay in your life much longer, is they don't respect you. They're just in your life because they're getting their needs met. Keep an eye out for that. When you start setting those boundaries, some people are going to be amazing with it right away. Some people are going to take a little bit of time, but they're going to come around. And some people are going to do everything in their power to make you backpedal.
Absolutely. We've all had those people in our lives, even me, where I knew my boundaries were being pushed to the limits and somebody was pleading for me to do A, B, or C. And I kept saying, no, 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 and didn't want to give in to that. And yet they kept pushing. And finally, I knew that I had what you call a boundary buster and had to say no to the relationship
Yeah.
because of it.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to make those hard decisions because people will continue to do that to us, and that is not a healthy relationship.
Absolutely.
As we come to the close of the interview, my last question is, what advice would you give to someone who's never set a boundary before or is terrified to? What's one empowering step they can take today to begin?
Start small. Do not make your first boundary with your mom. We've all got our issues, okay? But start small. The first boundary you set should be with the massage therapist who's using a little bit too much pressure, or the hairdresser who's pulling your hair a little bit, uncomfortable. If you screw up, who cares? It doesn't matter. So start out small and build those muscles that I call it PEC for a reason. You have to build your boundary muscles, and you don't walk into the gym and pick up a 150-pound barbell. You start out with 10 and you work your way up. So start small. If you screw up, it's okay. Don't lose faith. The greatest boundary people that I've met and that I interviewed for my book, they didn't start out that way. They learned through trial and error and difficult circumstances. Just have faith and you can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's taking that first step. Well, thank you, Sheryl, for joining me on the Core Women podcast today.
Thank you so much.
You can follow Sheryl Green on LinkedIn, on Instagram and YouTube at Sheryl Green Speaks, and Facebook at You Had Me at No. And you can find her book, You Had Me at No, How Setting Healthy Boundaries Helps You Banish Burnout, Repair Relationships, and Save Your Sanity on Amazon.
Thank you for joining us on the Core Women Podcast with Dr. Summer Watson. We're so glad you're here and would love to connect more with you. Find us on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Core Women, and on Twitter at Core Women 1. For more about Core Women and Dr. Watson, visit corewomen.com. Want more support and resources for amazing women like you? Great! Join Dr. Watson and Jen Fontanilla at the Life, Love, and Money Collective, a Core Women production that aids in understanding the key traits that might be getting in the way of living a life that you are absolutely passionate about. Connect with Summer and Jen and find out more at thelifeloveandmoney.com.